Hey guys, welcome back to more Malicious Compliance Reddit stories. In this Ripestories video, imagine spending 7 years building a company's entire technology backbone from nothing, only to get fired right before your Christmas vacation with a whopping $5 severance check. But my boss would soon find out that this was the worst decision of his life. Let's dive right into the video. And the title story starts like this. I worked as the sole IT systems administrator for a freight brokerage and logistics company. For those who don't know what that means, basically we connected shippers who needed stuff moved with carriers who had trucks to move it. The company handled everything from arranging pickups, tracking shipments across the country, managing customs paperwork for cross-border loads, invoicing, carrier payments, the whole deal. At our peak, we were coordinating somewhere around 400 loads per day across the country and into parts of Canada and Mexico. The company had roughly 200 employees. Dispatchers, account managers, operations coordinators, billing staff, warehouse liaisons, compliance people, management, and then me, the IT department. All of me, one guy running the entire technology backbone for a company that literally couldn't function without computers. I'd been there for 7 years when all of this went down, and when I first started, the place was a disaster from a technology standpoint. They had a single server running in a code closet that also doubled as a breakroom storage area. I'm not exaggerating here. There were boxes of coffee filters stacked on top of the server rack. The network was a mess of consumer-grade routers daisy-chained together. Half the office was running on Wi-Fi that dropped out whenever someone microwaved lunch. Their dispatch software was an ancient piece of junk that crashed twice a day, and when it crashed, dispatchers had to call carriers on personal cell phones because the phone system was not backed up either. Over 7 years, I transformed that entire operation. I built out a proper server room with climate control, redundant power, and fire suppression. I designed and installed the entire network infrastructure from scratch with enterprise-grade switches, proper segmentation, VPN tunnels for our remote offices, and a firewall that actually worked. I migrated the company to a modern transportation management system, which is the software that runs dispatch, load tracking, carrier management, and customer portals. Furthermore, I integrated that TMS with the accounting software, the document management system, the EDI connections to our biggest clients, and the GPS tracking feeds from carriers. I built custom automation scripts that handled load matching, rate calculations, and automated status updates to clients. I set up the entire phone system, the security cams, the door access cards, the backup systems, just everything. And here is the important part. Because I was the only IT person, I was the only one who knew how all of it worked together. I had documentation, sure, I kept some decent notes because I'm not an idiot, and I knew that if I got hit by a bus, the company would need something to work from. But there's a massive difference between having documentation and actually understanding how 24 interconnected systems talk to each other through custom scripts, API integrations, and configurations that I had tweaked over the course of 7 years. Nobody else in that building could tell you what an API was, let alone troubleshoot one. I had brought this up to management multiple times over the years. I told them we needed at least one more IT person, but ideally 2. I told them that having a single point of failure for the entire technology infrastructure of a company this size was reckless, and every time the response was the same. Too expensive, budget doesn't allow it, maybe next year, the usual. I accepted it because the pay was decent, the work was interesting enough, and I had a lot of autonomy. Nobody was micromanaging me because nobody understood what I did, and my direct boss for most of my time there was the VP of operations, and he was great. He trusted me completely. If I said we needed a new server, he approved it, and if I said a software upgrade was necessary, he signed off on it. He did not understand the technical stuff, but he understood that the wheels fell off whenever I was not around, so he made sure I was happy. Then the company brought in a new CTO. Now, the logistics industry does not typically have CTOs. I mean, we're not Silicon Valley. But the CEO had gone to some leadership conference where a bunch of speakers talked about digital transformation, and he came back convinced that we needed a chief technology officer to so-called modernize the enterprise. These were his words, not mine, and conveniently the CEO happened to have a college buddy who had just left some startup that went under and was looking for some work. This buddy had a business degree and had worked in sales management most of his career and had apparently once managed a team that built a mobile app. That was his technology qualification, and from day one this guy was a problem. He walked in wearing a sport coat over a t-shirt, like he was about to deliver a keynote at some tech expo, introduced himself to everyone as the so-called new head of technology strategy, and immediately started questioning everything I had built. He did not ask questions to understand how things worked, instead he asked questions to find things to criticize so he could justify his own existence. In his first week, he pulled me into a meeting and told me that our infrastructure was outdated and not aligned with modern cloud-first principles. I asked him what specifically he thought needed to change, and he started throwing around buzzwords like serverless architecture and containerization and zero-trust networking. I asked him if he understood what any of those things would actually involve for a fried brokerage running a proprietary TMS with a legacy EDI connections, and he told me he did not appreciate my attitude and that I needed to be more open to innovation. Over the next few months it got worse. He kept scheduling meetings to discuss his technology roadmap, which was basically just a PowerPoint full of buzzwords he had copied from some blog posts. He wanted to migrate everything to the cloud within 6 months. I explained that our TMS vendor didn't even offer a cloud version and that our EDI connections required on-premise hardware and that a migration like that would take a minimum of 18 months even with a full team. He accused me of being resistant to change, and he also started undercutting my authority in ways that were just insulting. He approved software purchases without even consulting me. One time he bought licenses for some project management tool that wasn't compatible with our network security setup, then got angry at me when I told him it would not work. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," he said in front of the entire operations team. "This is why we need new leadership and technology. Our current setup cannot even handle basic modern software." The actual problem was that the software required a specific port that our firewall blocked for security reasons, but explaining that to someone who thinks a firewall is just something that slows down the internet was pointless. He brought in a consultant friend to assess our infrastructure, and the consultant produced a report that was essentially a sales pitch for his own services. The CTO waved it around at the next leadership meeting like it was proof that I'd been doing a terrible job. He emailed it to the CEO with a note that said something like, "As you can see, we've been significantly underperforming on the technology front. I believe this validates the need for the strategic direction I've been proposing." I saw that email because he accidentally CC'd me on it, and when I replied pointing out several factual errors in the consultant's report, he replied all with, "I think we should leave the strategy to the strategists." He also had this incredibly annoying habit of taking credit for anything that worked and blaming me for anything that didn't, and when the new load tracking dashboard I built got praise from a major client, suddenly it was part of the digital transformation initiative I've been leading. When the ancient printer on the 3rd floor jammed for the millionth time, it was somehow evidence that our IT leadership needs improvement. But the real friction started when he began messing with the budget. He slashed the IT maintenance budget by 40% because he wanted to redirect funds to his innovation initiatives, which as far as I could tell meant paying his consultant friends to produce more PowerPoints. I warned him that the backup drives were aging and needed replacement, and that our firewall license was coming up for renewal, and that we were running out of storage on the main server. He told me to make it work with what we have and think creatively. I documented everything first. Every email, every request and every denial, I forwarded copies to my personal email, not the technical stuff or any proprietary information, just the correspondence showing that I was flagging risks and being told to ignore them. Call it paranoia, call it self-preservation, but I had a feeling this was heading somewhere bad. Then we get to December. My wife and I had planned a Christmas trip months in advance, and we were taking our kids to visit her parents in another state. We had booked flights, reserved a rental car, and her parents had planned a whole bunch of activities for their grandkids. It was non-refundable. I had submitted my PTO request back in September, got it approved by the VP of Operations, who was still technically in the chain, even though the CTO had been inserted above me on paper, and it was in the system. 2 days before I was supposed to leave, 2 days, the CTO called me into his office and told me that he needed me to work through Christmas week. He said he had scheduled a so-called systems audit with his consultant friends and he needed me present to walk them through everything. I told him I had approved vacation and I showed him the PTO approval in the system. He told me to cancel it. I said I could not. The flights were non-refundable, my family was expecting us, and this had been planned for months. He leaned back in his chair and gave me this look, like he was a king delivering a sentence. He said, and I will never forget this, "You need to decide what matters more to you, your little family trip or your career here. Cancel it or you're fired." I stared at him for a second, then I asked him if he was serious. He said he had never been more serious about anything, and he actually chuckled when he said it, like it was amusing to him, as if he was enjoying watching me squirm. He added, "And frankly, this is a test of loyalty. I need people on my team who are committed to this company's future and not some useless IT guy that doesn't care about the company. If a vacation is more important to you, then maybe you don't belong here." This is the part where I have to admit something. I was not surprised by all of this. I'd seen this coming for weeks. The CTO had been pushing harder and harder, looking for reasons to replace me with his own people. He'd even casually mentioned at a meeting that he was building a relationship with a managed services provider who could handle our IT needs more cost-effectively. Basically, he wanted me out. The Christmas thing was just his excuse. Now, here's where I made my play. I knew my employment contract inside and out because I had negotiated specific terms when I accepted the role years ago. My contract stated that either party could terminate employment with 2 weeks written notice and that in the event of termination without cause, the company owed me a severance package equal to 3 months' salary plus accrued benefits. Those terms had been grandfathered in from the original VP of operations who hired me and understood my value. I told him very calmly that if he was gonna terminate me, he needed to provide 2 weeks' notice as per my contract. I told him I was entitled to severance, and I told him that I was more than happy to transition my responsibilities during those 2 weeks, but his face turned red. He told me I was not in a position to negotiate, and he said, "Fine, you wanna play hardball? You're fired, effective immediately. Here's your severance." He pulled out his wallet, took out a $5 bill and slapped it on the desk. $5, that's what your attitude is worth to me. Consider it for cause, insubordination. And now get out of my building. I looked at that $5 bill on the desk. Part of me wanted to lose it, but a bigger part of me had been preparing for this moment for months. I knew exactly what was about to happen. I said, "Okay, I accept the termination. I'll need that in writing for my records though. And should I prepare any transition documentation for whoever takes over the systems?" He laughed, actually laughed at me. "Transition? No. I want you gone now. Don't touch anything on your way out. Security will watch you pack your desk and that's it. We don't need your transition." And yeah guys, that is what you call famous last words. He grabbed a piece of paper, scrawled something about immediate termination for cause, signed it, and practically threw it at me. I folded it, put it in my pocket, grabbed my personal items from my desk while a confused security guard watched everything, and then walked out. I did not touch a single company system while walking out. I didn't delete anything. I didn't sabotage anything. He told me not to touch anything, so I didn't touch anything. I just left. I drove home, told my wife what happened, and she was furious. Not at me, but at the situation, but I told her to trust me. We were still going on our trip, and things were gonna work out. We flew out the next morning. I spent the first day at my in-laws' house playing with my kids and eating my mother-in-law's cooking, and not thinking about work at all. It was one of the most peaceful days I'd had in years. Then my phone started buzzing. Day 2 after my termination, the dispatch server went down during peak morning hours. This was the server that ran the entire TMS, the system that every single dispatcher used to manage loads, communicate with carriers, and track shipments. 200 employees suddenly had nothing to work with. The operations team tried to fix it. Someone in the office who knew computers tried rebooting the physical server, and that actually made things worse. The TMS ran on a clustered setup with specific startup sequences, database integrity checks, and service dependencies that had to be brought up in the right order. Just hitting the power button brought the database up in a corrupted state because the proper shutdown and startup scripts were not followed. What started as an outage turned into potential data loss. Now, I want to be very clear about something. I did not withhold passwords maliciously at first. When I was terminated, effective immediately, my obligation to the company ended in that moment. I was no longer an employee, and I had no access to company systems, and more importantly, I had no legal authority to access them anymore. Sharing passwords to company infrastructure after termination would actually have been a security liability for me. If anything went wrong with those systems after I gave someone credentials, guess who they would blame? The disgruntled ex-employee who still had access. They tried calling me, but I didn't answer. They tried texting me, and I sent back a simple message. I'm no longer employed by the company. Please direct all inquiries through legal counsel. Day 3, the email server crashed. See, I had set up the email server with automated maintenance scripts that ran on a specific schedule. Those scripts ran under a service account, but the service account credentials were stored in a password vault that only I had access to. When the scripts hit their scheduled credential rotation and nobody was there to approve the renewal in the vault, the authentication chain broke. Without that maintenance running, the mail database ballooned until it crashed, no email for the entire company, and day 4 was when things got truly ugly. The payroll system locked up, it was the week before Christmas and payday was supposed to be that Friday. The payroll system was integrated with the accounting software through a custom connector I had built, and that connector relied on a service account that, you guessed it, was linked to credentials only I had configured. The payroll clerk couldn't process any payments, and 200 employees were about to not get paid the week of Christmas. But wait, it gets even worse. The client-facing tracking portal went offline too. This was the system that our biggest clients used to check the status of their shipments in real time, and when that went down, phones started ringing off the hook, except the phones were also on a voice-over IP system that I'd configured, and wouldn't you know it, that system was starting to act up too because the licensing server that authenticated it had not been maintained since I left, and then the backup situation became clear. I had been running manual backup protocols because the CTO had cut the budget for the automated backup solution I'd requested, and my manual backups required a specific procedure done every night. Nobody knew that procedure, nobody had been trained on it, because there was never anyone to train. The last clean backup was from the night before my termination, everything after that was unprotected, and on day 5 one of the carrier payment files got corrupted. This was a file that tracked payments owed to about 300 carriers who had moved loads for us that month, and without that file the billing department had no idea who was owed what. They had paper records for some of it, but the automated reconciliation was gone. The carriers started calling, asking where their money was, some of them stopped accepting loads from us, and when your carriers won't pick up freight, you cannot deliver anything, and when you cannot deliver anything, well, clients leave. The dominoes just kept falling. The EDI connections to our 3 biggest clients dropped because the integration middleware stopped running, and these clients had been sending us load requests electronically, hundreds per day. Without EDI, those requests went into the void, and the clients didn't even know their loads were not being processed until their own customers started calling asking where their shipments were. One of those clients was a national retail chain that had Christmas inventory sitting in warehouses waiting to be delivered. You can imagine how that phone call went. I also found out later that the security systems started having issues. The door access cards were managed through a system tied to the main server, and when the server went down, the access card system lost its connection to the management server and defaulted to fail open, meaning every door in the building just unlocked. That included the warehouse area, and for days there was basically no access control. Anyone could walk in anywhere, and they lost some inventory to theft during that window. By day 6, the CEO was personally calling me, not the CTO, the CEO. He left me 3 voicemails that got progressively more desperate, and the first one was professional, asking if I could consult on some technical issues. The second one offered to pay me a generous hourly rate to come back temporarily. The third one was practically begging. I didn't call back. I forwarded everything to the employment attorney I had retained the day after my termination, and they tried to hire an emergency IT firm to come in and fix things. The firm sent someone to assess the situation, and they quoted $50,000 just for the assessment phase, not the fix, just to figure out what they were looking at. And they said it would take a minimum of 2 weeks before they could even begin remediation because they had to reverse engineer systems they'd never seen before. And my documentation was actually thorough, but it was written for someone with my level of knowledge. For an outside firm coming in cold, reading my notes would be like reading a recipe in a language you only half understand. Meanwhile, the financial damage was piling up already. Client contracts had service-level agreements with penalty clauses for tracking outages. Carriers who were not getting paid were filing complaints and dropping the company from their preferred broker lists, and the payroll issue turned into a labor complaint because you cannot just not pay people on payday. The total damage estimate I heard later was somewhere around $300,000 in direct costs, plus another $200,000 in potential legal exposure from the SLA violations and the payroll mess. And the CTO? Well, he was running around the office like a chicken with his head cut off, screaming at everyone, blaming the operations team, blaming the billing department, and blaming everyone except the one person who was actually responsible. Which was him. The CEO then called an emergency meeting with the ownership group, and the company had a few outside investors who had put in capital when the business expanded, and they had seats at the table for major decisions. These investors were not happy, and they started asking very pointed questions about how the company's entire technology infrastructure could be dependent on a single person with no backup plan, and why that person had been terminated without any transition period. The CTO tried to spin it. He said I was insubordinate and that I had refused a reasonable work request and that my termination was justified. Then one of the investors asked to see the documentation, and they saw his scrawled termination note, and they saw the $5 severance, and they saw my PTO approval from months earlier, they saw my emails warning about the single point of failure risk, and they saw his emails cutting the IT budget. One of the investors, I was told later, asked the CTO a very simple question. So let me get this straight. You terminated the only person who understands our systems with no transition plan because he would not cancel an approved vacation? And your severance offer was $5? The CTO apparently tried to explain that it was about principle and setting expectations. The investor responded by asking how that principle was working out financially, given that the company was currently hemorrhaging money and couldn't process payroll anymore. The ownership group fired the CTO that same day, just gone, walked out the same way I had, except without the $5 bill. I heard from a friend who still worked there that the CTO actually argued with security about being allowed to grab his fancy espresso machine from his office, and they let him take it. Is this guy Jordan Schlansky or something? The espresso machine just reminded me of him. Anyway, small consolation for a guy who had just torpedoed his own career. The CEO called my attorney directly. He said they wanted me back, not just as the IT admin, they wanted to offer me the director of IT position with a significant raise, a proper team budget to hire 2 additional IT staff, and a new contract with better severance terms, and a written apology. My attorney asked about the wrongful termination claim we were preparing, and the CEO said that they were prepared to settle. We negotiated back and forth for a few days, and my attorney was excellent and made it very clear that we had a strong case and were fully prepared to go further if needed. I won't share the exact settlement number, but it was significantly more than $5. Let's just say the $5 bill on my desk is a reminder of how much more the company ended up paying for the CTO's little power trip. Here's the thing though, I didn't just jump back, I took my time, I finished my family vacation. I spent New Year's with my kids and I let them sweat for another week. During that time, the emergency IT firm had managed to get the dispatch server back online in a limited capacity, but the system was running at maybe 30% functionality, dispatchers were doing half their work on paper, and personal phones, it was just chaos. When I finally came back, it was on my terms, new title, Director of Information Technology, significant salary increase, and a hiring budget for 2 junior IT staff. A proper disaster recovery plan that the ownership group signed off on personally, and a new clause in my contract that said any termination required ownership approval with 30 days notice and full severance regardless of the stated cause. My first week back, I had the dispatch server fully operational within 4 hours, and the email was back up by lunch, payroll was processed that afternoon, and the tracking portal was live by the next morning. All of those systems that the emergency IT firm said would take weeks to assess, I fixed them in about 2 days. The CTO tried to fight his termination. He claimed that he got scapegoated, but the documentation trail was so clear that his attorney apparently advised him to just walk away. Last I heard, he is back to doing sales consulting somewhere. I really hope he stays far away from any technology decisions. And the next one is a malicious compliance story, which is titled "Offer me unlimited repayment terms and I'm gonna take it." So when I moved out of my old apartment, they charged me like $150 for carpet cleaning. The maintenance dude literally pulls the carpet back off the tack board, and the carpet was not damaged, just normal wear from living there, and I tried to talk to them about it to see if we could come to some kind of agreement on what was reasonable here, but they would not discuss it. No explanation, no negotiation, just a bill. What they did tell me though was that I could make payments for any amount and for any length of time, so that got me thinking. For the past 3 years, I've been paying them 1 penny a month, and better yet, it's a credit card they are charging. I believe at my current payment rate, the balance will be fully paid off in roughly 1,300 years. I figure by then, either the carpet, the building, or civilization itself will be gone, but technically, I'm honoring the agreement they gave me. And yeah guys, thank you so much for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.